happening, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Adam, and this is Vancity Audi. First of all, a massive thanks to all of you that pitched into my GoFundMe to make this video a reality. Each and every one of you know that the money we raised is going to the fuel costs. Secondly, PG Performance, thank you so very much. A long-standing member of our community. 43 years now they've been in business, providing tuning solutions and hardware solutions for Volkswagens and Audis. They're located in Surrey, British Columbia. The funds that they provided is going to be taking care of all the dyno time today, and there is going to be a lot of it. Now that I have the thanks out of the way, I just wanted to let you guys know I'm gonna spend a little bit of time now breaking down how this testing is going to take place today, the methods that we have to our madness, the reasons why we're doing this in the first place, and then we're gonna get into the dyno comparison. If you don't care about any of that and all you want to know is who won, man, jump to the very end of the video. I will do a summary for all of you of the final results we saw from all the fuels, what tested the best, what tested the worst, and how much horsepower and torque each of the fuels made. So first off, let's get to why we're making this video. So many years ago, there was a debate in the community. We had a Shell 91 octane fuel and a Chevron 94 octane fuel. Back then, neither of those fuels had ethanol in them. People, for whatever reason, I do not know why, were saying, I can feel in the seat of my pants, this Shell 91, my car goes faster. We had data logged a bunch of cars. When I say we, I mean Ryder Performance and I, the shop that I've partnered with for years now with all of my Audi builds. And we could never find a car that worked better on Shell 91 than it did with Chevron 94. So we came here over 3 years ago now, and we performed our first fuel comparison video. Chevron 94 smashed the competition. We saw as much as 39 wheel horsepower difference from a stock car, no modifications made. The only change that was made is we changed the fuel from Chevron 94 to Shell 91. The video is on my channel if you want to check it out. Our minds were blown. After that, we wanted to see what took place in the summer blends. We wanted to see the difference between a winter blend formula and a summer blend formula. Just so you guys know, there is a difference. I believe the fuel changes over in about September to the winter formula and then back to the summer formula in roughly April. Now, when I say that, what we found in our testing is the ethanol contents of each of these pump gases is slightly higher in the summer than it is in the winter. The reason we would think that to be the case is probably cars start a little easier when they don't have as much ethanol in them, and the blends, I have to think it has something to do with the colder temperatures. Fuel needs to ignite easier at colder temperatures to make sure your car runs efficiently, compared to the summer where it's always hot out. You don't necessarily need that. So that's the reason we came to the dyno for the second time, to test it all over again. I think we might have added one more fuel. We actually added Costco 91 to that fuel comparison, and all those people that love Costco fuel were very saddened by the fact that it made less horsepower and less torque, providing the least amount of knock resistance of any of the fuels we tested on that particular day. Again, that video is on the channel if you want to check it out. Then Shell Canada brought out the sickest fuel that we had in the Lower Mainland ever. It's called Shell V-Power Nitro Plus and is a thing of beauty. We were all in love because us performance enthusiasts were able to fill up with a 93 octane fuel with up to 10% ethanol, and it provided the best knock resistance we had seen in years. And to this day, now this video is being shot in November 2023, that is still, in our opinion, the king of fuels. But there's some new options in town. Chevron 94 now offers a fuel with up to 10% ethanol in it as well, just like Shell does. Except theirs is rated at a 94 octane level, whereas Shell is at 93. Is that going to make any difference whatsoever? We're gonna find out today. Not only that, Esso is now offering a 93 octane fuel in the Lower Mainland as well. At this present time and date, there's only a few stations that have it in stock. You'll go to the pumps and you'll see 4 options rather than 3, and that final option is Supreme Plus 93 octane from Esso. So we're gonna be comparing those against a Shell 92 from Washington. So Washington is just south of us, and their fuel has consistently, in the past, performed better than ours. Even though their fuel is 92 octane rated, and ours was Chevron 94 ethanol free, rated at 94 octane, their fuel consistently performed better than ours did. It provided better knock resistance. So we have a Shell 92 offering from Blaine, Washington to test as well. And then finally our 91 options. We have Shell 91, again, up to 10% ethanol. That's still the V-Power Nitro Plus formula. And then lastly, for all of you cheapskates out there that spend $150,000 to $200,000 on a car, but want to cheap out with what fuel you put in the tank, we're going to be testing Costco 91 again. The reason for that is it now contains up to 10% of ethanol as well.
Now, to ensure that each fuel sample from each gas station only contained the correct octane of fuel, I put the initial 5 liters of fuel that came out of each fuel line into my wife's SUV. That way I cleaned the lines out from any customer that may have been using a lower octane fuel previous to my filling of the jerry can. That way there was 20 liters of fresh, unaltered fuel from each gas station of the appropriate octane in each jerry can.
All of these fuels are extremely equally matched in terms of their ethanol contents now. In previous years, I tested all of the different ethanol contents of these fuels, manually of course, because I want to get it as close to perfect as I can, and they tested all over the place. Some with E0, 0% ethanol, some with 10% ethanol, or E10. In today's case, I manually tested, meticulously tested all of these fuels for their ethanol contents by hand to make sure I knew exactly what ethanol content they had. If you can believe it, every single one of them today measured at E7.5. So on my little measuring device, my Fuel It ethanol measuring device, they all came out at 7.5% ethanol content, which is crazy to think that everything is equal across the board today, which is fantastic for our testing. Now a little bit about the dyno. Today we are at Racing Greed, the shop that I performed all of these tests at because I have to keep my testing standards the same throughout all these videos to make sure that something isn't off from the other ones. We are using their Mustang all-wheel drive dyno, and we are showing you Mustang dyno numbers. Now just know a lot of you might be thrown off by how low this dyno reads. You might think, oh my God, something's wrong with the car. No, something is not wrong with the car. The dyno just reads slightly lower than others, but it is very consistent. And for that reason, that's why I've always used this dyno showing Mustang dyno numbers with these style of videos. Now for the car we're using today is a buddy of mine, Jared's. Thank you so much to Jared for the use of his RS6 Avant, an absolutely brilliant car featuring a 4-liter twin-turbo V8, a monster of a vehicle. We're gonna hear a bunch of cool noises out of this thing today to see how much power it makes from one fuel to the other. Now keep in mind guys, this car from the factory is meant to run 91 octane fuel at a minimum. Now, we've seen repeatedly in previous testing that cars are requiring 91 octane fuel here in the Lower Mainland benefit from higher octane fuel. 93, 94, they'll all make more power than you would with just the standard 91. Now, quite the opposite of what we featured on the channel before, where I've had 2 87 octane tune vehicles, they made no additional power using premium fuel. But in terms of stock vehicles that require 91 octane fuel to run, we've seen significant improvements running higher octane fuel. You know the car, you know the dyno, you know the brands of fuel, you know the ethanol contents of each of them, you know who helped me put this video together. So now it's time to get down to the dyno testing. Now what we're going to do in today's dyno testing is we're going to run a fuel as many times as it takes until we see the horsepower and the torque figures starting to drop off. Every single run, we are going to data log the car, meaning I have my laptop plugged into the ECU and I'm figuring out what is going on with that fuel, how much knock resistance it's able to provide, the peak timing value, the timing retardation we're seeing between cylinder 2, 4, 6, and 8, which I've been told for this vehicle are the noisiest of cylinders, and lastly, the intake air temps. We have to make sure the intake air temps are not skyrocketing, because if we do, and the car makes less power, that means that that testing is null and void because the car was too hot for that. We want to make sure that the value of the intake air temps is similar throughout all of the runs to make sure that that is one thing that stays the same. Besides that, we're going to see the horsepower and torque figures go up and go down. We're going to see the peak timing advance go up and go down, and we're going to see the timing retardation go up and go down throughout all of these fuels. I have said enough, guys. Let's get to the dyno testing. I'm super, super excited. One final thing I'm going to leave you guys with. I really, really hope that the 94 and the 93 octane fuels all test the same, because it'll give all of us performance enthusiasts that many more options to get awesome fuel for our cars. Let's get to the dyno. Some pretty crazy results right off the bat. Shell 93, Chevron 94, and Esso 93 all performing almost identically on this 2023 Audi RS6. Some of you may think this is some pretty incredible news, but I do not. Shell 91 and Shell 92 from the States made almost identical power figures as we saw with the 93 and 94 octane fuels. For the sake of this video, that is not good news. Well guys, this is a little awkward. I don't know how to tell you guys this. We just spent 2/3 of our day dyno testing this stock RS6 Avant, testing all of the fuels. And in these amazing environmental conditions, I think we hit a peak of like 12 degrees Celsius. It's averaged -500 to -1000 DA throughout the day. It didn't matter what fuel we used. Every single fuel performed identically to the other. The peak timing advance we saw across all of the fuels was 9 degrees. All of them, they all hit peak timing. The most correction we saw out of any fuel was like 0.25 degrees out of a couple cylinders, but it still made adequate power. It still made all the power and all the torque that it could. So this has never happened before to us. It's always been a huge difference in terms of the fuel we use. So awesome for us in winter in cold conditions. The fuels that you use operated wonderfully on this stock calibration.
Once I noticed that every single fuel performed almost identically, it made me think a little about the test vehicle I chose to use. This RS6 comes with Audi's 4-liter V8 twin-turbo motor, which is labeled the EA825. That exact motor also comes in multiple other vehicles. Sadly, each of these other vehicles makes more horsepower and more torque than the car I chose to test with. The 2023 Audi RS6 Avant, which is our test car today, is the most detuned version of the EA825. If I was able to wrangle a 2023 Lamborghini Urus Performante in its stock form, that would have been a much better test on our fuel. Sorry about that, guys.
Point of this video is to find out the best performance fuel we have available to us. So the awesome, amazing owner of this vehicle, Jared, has decided to flash the car to Unitronic Stage 1 91 octane software. He already had this car tuned. We've already shot some videos with it. We dialed it back to stock for this video. But now we're gonna ramp it up a bit. And what that's going to do is it's going to demand more out of the fuel in the gas tank. It has ramped up the timing, it's ramped up the boost. So what we're going to see now is how much of a difference these fuels make in terms of a performance modified vehicle. Now again, I'm sorry guys, I've never had to do this before. We've always wanted to stick with stock calibrations because it's always made a massive difference. But because it hasn't today, we're stepping it up. 91 octane tune, we're gonna make boatloads more power. We're gonna start out with Costco 91 and we're gonna ramp it back up all the way up to the highest octane fuel and what we've had experience as being the best performance fuel, Shell V-Power Nitro Plus 93 octane. Let's see how this goes. Cross your fingers, this works better than the first 2/3 of this day. here we have the first fuel running the Unitronic Stage 1 91 octane tune. This is the Costco 91 fuel, making 547 wheel horsepower and 554 wheel torque. Let's look at that data log and see how it performed.
Rather than me going through the intake air temps for each of these logs, I'll let you know that we did not allow for an intake air temp of over 29 degrees Celsius to count for any of these runs. So every single log I'm about to go over with you has an intake air temp of less than 29 degrees Celsius. And here's the timing advance for Costco 91. The lowest value we saw was -3 degrees, and the peak value we saw was 6 degrees of timing advance. In terms of the timing retardation we saw, it kicked in as low as 2300 RPM, and that was 1.5 degrees being pulled from cylinder 4. And then as we get higher up in the RPMs, cylinder 2 kicks in as well with an additional 1.5 degrees of timing retardation. By 4800 RPM all the way to redline though, it did manage to clean itself up.
Now, how did this Shell 91 perform compared to the Costco 91? I can't believe I'm saying this, guys, but in today's conditions with these great low temperatures, virtually identical on this Unitronic Stage 1 91 octane tune. Those graphs are almost exactly the same. Let's look at the data log.
We saw the lowest of -3 degrees, which was the exact same as Costco 91 in terms of timing advance. And then we saw the peak timing advance of 6.5 degrees with Shell 91, which was 0.5 degree higher than Costco 91. In terms of timing retardation, slightly less than we saw with Costco 91, and starting a bit later in the run. At 2600 RPM, we saw a blip of 1.5 degrees being pulled from cylinder 2. It tapers off slightly and then is gone by 3700 RPM. And then cylinder 6 jumps in with only 0.8 degrees of timing retardation. And then that stops at 5200 RPM. And just like the Costco 91, from there on up until redline, it cleans itself up.
And how much additional horsepower and torque did we gain with Shell 92 from Washington State? Not much. Very, very little gain on this 91 octane file from Unitronic. Those graphs look almost identical, showing very, very little gain in performance using a 92 octane fuel versus the 91 octane. Let's take a look at the log.
And here we have the data log for Shell 92 from Blaine, Washington. The lowest timing advance we see is -3 degrees, but the difference between this and the 91 octane fuels is it lasts for a shorter amount of time. Then for our peak timing advance, for just a split second, we see 7.5 degrees of peak timing, which is higher than both of the 91 octane fuels. In terms of what we saw for timing retardation, it's less than both of the 91 octane fuels, but of the same amount. 1.5 degrees from cylinder 8, starting at 2800 RPM, and then it immediately tapers off. But cylinder 2 kicks in as well, with 1.5 degrees being pulled. All of that cleans up at 4100 RPM, which is sooner than both the 91 octane fuels, and then is nice and tidy all the way to redline.
All right, guys, we've wrapped up the Stage 1 91 octane tune results. The 91 octane fuel, both fuels performed very similarly. We stepped it up to the Shell 92 from Washington State. It improved slightly. So now we want to lean on the fuel even more. What we're going to do to finish this video is we're going to step it up to a Stage 1 plus 93 octane tune, relying more on the octane and the knock resistance of the fuel. We've flashed the car over to the Stage 1 plus 93 octane file. Then we're gonna swap over to the Chevron 94 and then finalize with the Shell 93. We're gonna see how much of a difference these 93 octane fuels make. On the stock calibration, it didn't make a lick of a difference, but is it going to make a difference when we're pushing it that much harder with that much more aggressive timing, that much more boost on this 93 octane tune? And And now that we stepped it up to Unitronic Stage 1 Plus for 93 octane fuel, what did we see using Esso 93? We made 570 wheel horsepower, 573 wheel torque with a very nice clean looking graph. Let's take a look at the data log.
And here's the data log for Esso 93. We see a low of negative 2.5 degrees of timing advance and a high or a peak of 11 degrees of timing up at red line, significantly more than a stock tune or a stage 1 91 octane tune. Because of that, we are demanding more out of the fuel, and now we are seeing more timing retardation. At almost 2,700 RPM, two of the cylinders are pulling 1.5 degrees, while another is 0.8 degrees. It clears up for just a second, and at 4,100 RPM, it pulls 2.3 degrees from two of the cylinders, being 4 and 8. Then it gets even worse at 6,000 RPM, where we're seeing correction out of all 4 cylinders that we're logging out of the 8. All the way up until red line, we are still seeing correction, 2.3 degrees out of 2, 0.8 degrees out of 6, and 1.5 degrees of ignition retardation out of cylinder 8.
And now for the most significant gain in horsepower and torque that we've experienced today, an additional 7 wheel horsepower and an additional 5 wheel torque when we stepped it up to Chevron 94 instead of Esso 93. As you guys can see, we gain power throughout the entire pull using Chevron 94. Let's take a look at the data log.
We saw a low of negative 1.5 degrees of timing advance, and we saw a peak value of 11 degrees, which was the exact same as Esso 93. The big difference, though, is the timing retardation. We don't see nearly as much being pulled from the cylinders in Chevron 94 as we did in Esso 93. In the mid-range, we definitely see more. We see 1.5 out of cylinder 2 and 2.3 out of cylinder 4 and 8, but it definitely cleans itself up a little better up top. It hits hard again. We see actually 3 degrees being pulled from cylinder 8, but it did manage to make more power.
Well guys, we have now been here for a total of 9.5 hours. Yes, 9.5 hours going through all of these fuels to get you the best comparison we possibly can. This is the final jerry can I will be putting in this car, this poor RS6 Avant. Oh my God, the stress it has been through today. The cameraman, Jared, oh my God, thank you so much for your time today, dude. This has been an incredible experience. Let's see what this Shell 93 can do in comparison to the other 93 and 94 octane fuels. And now that we've switched over to Shell V-Power Nitro Plus, we had the largest gain of the day with 10 wheel horsepower and an additional 8 wheel torque. The only difference that we noticed that was negative was down low. You can see the little dip down low, but everywhere else throughout the entirety of the pull, we had more horsepower and we had more torque. Let's take a look at the data log.
And now for the data log of Shell 93, we see a low of negative 1.5 degrees for timing advance and a peak timing advance of 10.5 degrees, which is half a degree less than both the Chevron 94 and the Esso 93, yet it made more horsepower. Now, if we look at the timing retardation, we can see that it provided better knock resistance throughout the entirety of the run. As much as there were some corrections, not nearly as much as with the other fuels. We still see 1.5 degrees in cylinder 4 and 1.5 degrees in cylinder 8. And then up top, we see 2.3 degrees being pulled from cylinder 8 up until red line.
Well guys, we've seen what this thing can do on pump gas. Esso 93, Chevron 94, Shell 93. Now we've ramped it up to a little special cocktail of mine I like to call E20. We've added additional E85 into the tank. We're at about an E20 blend, up from an E7.5 blend, which all the other fuels had. We got this ethanol from Northside Petroleum, the one and only supplier of E85 in the Lower Mainland. Sean's gonna rip it and see how much additional power we can make, if any at all. but for sure, we're gonna clean up the corrections along the way. Let's see what we can do. For the final graph of the day, we spiked the fuel with a little bit of extra E85. We now made 598 wheel horsepower and 594 wheel torque, gaining an additional 12 wheel horsepower and 8 wheel torque. Look at those gains throughout the entirety of the pull. So many people out there say that this additional ethanol is a bad thing. I disagree. Let's take a look at the log.
And here's our last data log for our final fuel of the day, E20. We saw a low of negative 1.5 degrees of timing advance, and we saw a high of 10.5 degrees, which was the exact same as we saw with Shell 93. We did make more horsepower and more torque though, because we saw virtually no timing retardation. 0.8 degrees out of cylinder 8 at 2300 RPM, and that's it. Zero timing retardation the rest of the pull. All of that additional ethanol providing amazing resistance to knock.
As promised, guys, here is a summary of today's numbers. The top three are stage 1 plus 93 octane numbers and the power figures that we achieved on each fuel. Then we drop it down to the stage 1 91 octane figures that we achieved on each fuel, virtually identical for the stage 1 stuff. Very minimal difference except for a little bit of a gain with the Shell 92. And then overall, the Beastmode E20, we got just shy of 600 wheel horsepower, 594 for the wheel torque. One hell of a long day here, but well worth it. Well guys, they're freaking kicking me out. I have been here 12 hours to get you guys as close to perfect testing results as I could. Thank you so very, very much to Jared and Sean for all of their efforts today, for sticking around, for putting in these long hours. I couldn't have done it without them. Thank you again to all of you that donated to make this video a reality, including PG Performance. You guys are freaking awesome. And even those of you that just watched the video for the last 30 seconds to see the results, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you all very, very much for watching. And until next time, take care.